It hasn't lifted every boat, but it's lifted quite a few. But now is the tide ebbing. The state's checking account, not a bad way to begin the summer. It's Walmart week in Fayetteville. What about the weeks to come? And the politics of state, ever shriller. Arkansas Week next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. Economics, very big in the news this past week. That's where we'll begin. Hoyt Purvis joins us from the political science and journalism faculties at the University of Arkansas. Lance Turner, reporter, columnist for Arkansas Business. Lance, you're the man.
Wow.
We'll start with this morning's numbers because while Arkansas has a record low jobless rate, the numbers this morning coming out of D.C. for the nation as a whole were a little discouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, they really laid an egg with this report because there were calls, analysts, a lot of economists expected that in May the economy would have added about 160,000 jobs. And so I did a double take when I saw the number this morning of 38,000, which is well below what people were expecting. The unemployment rate, the top line number, actually did trend down a bit, 4.7% from 5%, but that was because you had nearly 500,000 people moving out of the survey entirely because they had given up looking for work.
Yeah.
So two pieces of bad news and a third piece of bad news in this report. Not a lot of good news in this report at all. The third piece is that they revised down previous surveys. So April and March, they also backed off some of those numbers, which were decent. But we're still sort of, under that 200,000 mark, which we were sort of adding on average last year. And so it's created this sense of unease that's sort of creeping back in the economy that things are slowing down again. And of course, it's completely upended what people thought may happen this summer with the Federal Reserve and interest rates. Also this week we had gotten a report from the Beige Book, which is the Federal Reserve, their survey of all the districts in the country of how, just an anecdotal survey of how things are going in various sectors. And that survey reflected, sort of modest gains. But there was some thought that coming out of that survey, looking at what people had said, that inflation-wise we were doing well. And so there were indications that perhaps the Fed would feel good about starting to raise interest rates this summer at its meetings. But this report this morning, this job report, sort of blows that out of the water. And now it may be September, it may be later in the year before the Fed decides to start cranking up those interest rates again.
Yeah, if then. But in the meantime, though, Arkansas businesses entrepreneurs, whatever, established business looking for capital, and probably, I couldn't find any source this morning who thought there was even a prayer in the very near term that the Fed would act.
In terms of raising the rates?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, it doesn't look like that at all now. And so, that'll be, stocks this morning are down, I think, because of just what this says generally about the economy. But I think there'll be some investors who'll be happy to have those low interest rates for a while. It's cheap money continued for the near future. Even the threat of an interest rate rise is good for lots of parts of the economy. If you think those rates are going to go up in the next few months, you may be willing to pull the trigger on a mortgage or any number of things because you want to lock in those low rates. And so it takes a little urgency out of the economy as well. Two steps forward, one step back, perhaps, and then, of course, all kinds of implications for the presidential race. This is the time of year when people start paying attention to these kinds of things, and when they go to the polls in November, how they feel about the economy is a big part of how they vote.
Tea leaf time, consumer spending with these job numbers.
Well, consumer spending has has been, I think, slowly working its way up. But it's one report, I think, is the key, and we'll need to see what the trend is going to be going forward. And clearly, the downward revisions don't reflect well on what could happen in the future. But it'll just depend on how people feel, obviously. And some of the numbers that we've seen in the state report, the DFNA report, which we'll talk about, I think, some more, indicate that consumer spending continues to be fairly healthy. Some of those sales tax collections continue to be strong. Yeah. A lot of it's just, it is reading the tea leaves and just seeing kind of how people feel and what the overall mood's going to work out to be.
Consumer confidence, Hoyt, very important, economically, politically.
Well, it is, and by and large, most of the economic news has been marginally on the good side recently, and as Lance has indicated, this latest the jobs report and just some of the other things that are going on, I think it's going to cause a lot of people to kind of step back and see where we're going at this point, and it could definitely have political implications, definitely.
Well, can you drive in Fayetteville?
Well, happily, I'm not confronting that right now. Right
at
about
this
now,
moment,
right
no,
about now, it would be. But it's always interesting when the Walmartians, as we call them, come into to Northwest Arkansas and Fayetteville in particular. And of course, they've been preparing Bud Walton Arena now for some days, and it is, particularly given the fact that there's a lot of construction and road work going on in the city of Fayetteville right now. You add in the thousands of people coming in for the Walmart meeting, and it does make things crazy. Lots of buses transporting the associates from one event to another, and it's always nice. You see people walking all around town, all around the campus, from all over the world, and it's an interesting sort of cultural experience. But it has become quite the extravaganza.
Yeah, the investment experience, Lance. Walmart, of course, a company, and it's always in transition, I guess. But it's.
I don't know that there's been any bigger transition to Walmart in a while, probably a decade or so, and just in terms of what they're facing now. The entire retail landscape has been completely upended by the internet, by competitors like Amazon. And so that has been the last 2 years, really, this year and the last year, they have really sort of signaled a switching of gears on a number of fronts to confront the threat of changing consumer habits. This generation coming up doesn't want to walk into a store and buy things like you and I have done in the past. They are aiming for this sort of interesting blend of a digital shopping experience, and then also the convenience of perhaps stuff being brought to you. Yeah. And so you're hearing a lot of those kinds of notes. Walmart's having to pivot in an interesting way. They've invested so much in all this brick and mortar across the country. Even now, they're still building more supercenters, even as they have closed stores quite famously in the first quarter. So they've got a lot of infrastructure, physical infrastructure that emerging retailers do not have, and they have to compete. They have to find a way to compete with those people that have those lower costs. So, off the top of this morning's show, the chairman, Greg Penner, talked a lot about, saying we have to have greater digital relationships with our customers. That was perhaps the first thing of substance he said today. And that is really where they are pivoting on just about every front, internationally and domestically.
I think it's kind of interesting. I agree completely with what you're saying, Lance, but it's also interesting that Walmart they're kind of trying to straddle, if you will, the sort of tradition, the bringing back the smiley face logo, but at the same time, working with drones and doing all sorts of other high-tech things. And obviously they have a challenge, but it's a challenge that they recognize, and it's going to be interesting to see how they manage, particularly competing with all the online shopping that goes on now.
They really want to leverage those stores, and so they'll use those stores as distribution points. We've seen this site-to-store type experience where you order things online and then you can go to your neighborhood Walmart to pick it up. And then the stores themselves, I think they see an opportunity where they can really differentiate among sort of this faceless online experience that you may have where you don't deal with humans at all, where you can go into a store. the greeters are back. You can have this personal touch at the store. And then they want to, with the smiley face returning and that whole campaign, they really need to emphasize and want to emphasize that they are the absolute low price leader. Right. And that's where they've lost their way a little bit as well with the Amazons of the world. And so, yeah, they right now it's a question of using what we've got to differentiate ourselves and use those advantages as best we can. But you feel like in another 20 years there'll be another phase to this as well, where the fewer stores, may be in the cards.
Yeah.
Beam your order over. I don't know when it'll materialize.
Exactly.
Or something. Who knows? Bentonville to Bangkok. This is a global question. It's a global matter.
Well, I mean, obviously, Walmart has a major stake and is a major player in the global economy. And, we're hearing a lot about globalization and the global economy in a slightly different context right now. But clearly, Walmart is affected by and affects what happens globally. And they're a major player. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And China this week, again, was sort of emphasized as the big prize that Walmart needs to capitalize on, because growth in the United States, quite frankly, is sort of leveled out. There's not many more places Walmart can go, and as that growth has stagnated, and this has been the story for 5, 6, 7 years, is that they've had to increasingly look overseas for that growth. And there they've had mixed results in some places, and they've pulled out of countries entirely in some places. And China is interesting because it's a complete and total different cultural sort of outlook there, and you have different types of stores, and you have live fish in the store, and you have different products, and you have to deal with vendors in different ways and deal with customers in different ways, and so there's been a little bit of awkwardness there, but the market in China is so huge that it cannot be ignored, and if you're going to grow at all anywhere, you have to square off with China.
Yeah,
so
you're absolutely right, and particularly in the case of China, which is so important and where the potential is so great. Mm-hmm. But adjusting or adapting to local tastes, like the way things are packaged and presented,
or not packaged,
or not packaged, exactly. Right. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. And of course, China, or Walmart, like so many American businesses, has a profound interest in the Trans-Pacific trade agreement,
right,
which is in limbo in this presidential campaign, with a lot of Arkansas politicians, including our former First Lady, who once endorsed it, now taking a long, hard second look at it.
Yeah, it's really been interesting to see how the candidates have approached trade agreements in general and the TPP in particular. And as you say, former Secretary of Clinton, once thought to be a strong backer of the agreement, which does not include China. It has 12 Asian Pacific nations, and China's kind of on the outside in some ways of looking at this as a way to counter China, or else to draw China in to play more or less by the same rules as others do. But it has become politically poison. I think, all three of the currently standing candidates, not counting the libertarians or whatever, are against the TPP. And that continues to be something that both Trump and Sanders emphasize very strongly.
It's very easy to point to all the plants that have had to go out of business or go to Mexico because of trade deals, and it's very hard to make a more nuanced case that the U.S. has to be engaged on a global scale with trade, and that's just, it would take a 45 minute.
Tough to go to a union hall and argue.
Well, exactly, that too, and so it's tough as a presidential candidate to make any kind of argument for a trade deal.
It is, and people don't necessarily understand. We were talking about Walmart and low prices. Well, if Walmart's going to have those low prices, then we have to be engaged in the international economy. That's just the way it's going to work, and if we're not, then Walmart won't be able to offer those low prices. That's what it comes down to.
Back to Arkansas, Lance, you mentioned the DFNA report for May. Decent enough.
Not bad. There was some outliers in the report. Top line, just looking at the headlines, May was up by $5.3 million, May collections, but it was short of forecast by about $7.6 million. And a lot of that owes to kind of some one-time issues. First thing was, we've sort of had a mild summer so far, and so tax collections on utilities were down. And then also, Arkansas had to refund about $8 million to AT&T because AT&T apparently had overpaid its taxes. And so that sort of those were sort of unusual items that made the forecast miss. But overall, they're hewing pretty close to their forecast. I mean, for looking for the year, which is about to wrap up, they're within 0.5% of kind of what they expected to see. They're also one forecaster who works in DF&A is expecting anywhere from 160 million kind of neighborhood of a surplus to wrap up the year. So the governor made a great statement about that this is great, awesome budgeting on our part, and this is good to have a rainy day fund, et cetera, et cetera. All in all, not a bad year budgeting wise and results wise for state coffers.
Well, the Hutchinson administration, of course, beaming about the surplus, but the loyal opposition, some members of it anyway, take a slightly different view of it.
Yeah.
In terms of creating a surplus and then what you do with a surplus and how you got a surplus.
What you call a surplus and what is a surplus, and can that surplus be used for other purposes, and then what are the ramifications of that for other state-sponsored programs. So it is definitely a matter of some contention, I think you could say.
That being that no state employees got raises, that you've increased spending only just a little bit of amount, and then so you're saving X amount of dollars, and that's what builds up your surplus because of your budgeting.
And we hear a lot of talk about college tuition going up, but one of the reasons college tuition is going up is because there's no increase in the state funding going into higher education. So
the general fund agencies were essentially flat.
Right.
In the budget that starts in a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that plays into all the debate about how we're going to fund highways. The governor has what's widely viewed, I think, by a lot of folks is sort of a short-term. He would not say this, but sort of a short-term solution to how we're going to get some highway dollars to come back to the state, and others, including I think the highway department, are looking for a longer-term solution to that, rather than just surpluses and general revenue.
Okay, on to the politics of 2016. Arkansas has been fairly quiet. Hoyt, can it remain fairly quiet? I mean, the delegates are all chosen to the nominating conventions.
Compared to other places, I think Arkansas is fairly quiet and probably going to remain relatively quiet. But at the same time, we're all saturated with the presidential campaigns, and again, we're still in the warm-up phase. You'd never know it by the hot and heavy debates that are going on. I mean, the rhetoric and the claims and charges, and it's we've had just another week of really very serious campaigning by the major candidates, and I guess probably the most interesting thing that's happened among the many interesting things this week is that Hillary Clinton, whose campaign I think it can be said had been sort of in the doldrums. I think that's a fair characterization. She made a speech this week, ostensibly on foreign policy, but much broader than that. And generally, most commentators agreed that it was probably the best speech she's made in this campaign, if not the best speech she's made overall. And I think that was something that was very much welcomed by Democrats. And she really took Mr. Trump on in a direct way, much more so, I think, than she has in the past. And to some extent, he seemed to be a little back on his heels in response to that. Well, of course, not for very long, and we have the typical pattern that Donald Trump seems to have mastered, which is, he's a serial subject changer. He can, whatever is the topic, and he now is talking about this so-called Mexican judge in the Trump University controversy, and he has a knack for, that getting things out there. He likes to set the agenda,
Right.
and then to leave others to quibble about that while he moves on to other topics. And I think for the first time, the Clinton campaign seems to have sort of cornered him just a bit on that, which they really need to do, because when whatever polls you look at or whatever information you have, there's no doubt that Trump has tremendous backing and support and enthusiastic support in many corners of the country, including Arkansas.
What? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say, I think there was some doubt as to, sort of what the. I think the big question so far of Hillary Clinton's campaign has been, what's her method going to? How is she going to take Donald Trump on, and is she going to get down in the dirt with him? Because I think that's maybe the opportunity, but also the danger for her is if you get down on his level, that may not work out so well for her. But I think she got down a little bit, and she kind of tried to outsnark him a little bit, and I think so far she has done a fairly good job of it, at least as of this morning. So I think that was interesting that she really took him on in a direct way and said, very clearly, this is a guy who does not need to have his finger on the button. She went through all of his past foreign policy claims that he has made, some of them completely outrageous, and is really trying to frame him as someone who is absolutely not fit to be president. And then she did it with humor. She did it with some very sobering kind of debate. So it was interesting the tack that she's taken, and can she sustain that? And what does that look like when he hits back?
Yeah, I definitely think it was probably her strongest showing of this entire campaign period. Now, whether she can sustain that or not is another matter, and I'm sure there are going to be lots of ups and downs for both candidates. Some people have compared the speech have seen some analogy to the famous or infamous 1964 Daisy spot, which was used against Barry Goldwater by the Johnson campaign, tried to show or to suggest that Goldwater couldn't be trusted to have his finger on the nuclear button, and that the same applies in this case to Donald Trump. And I think that's something we're going to hear a lot more of in the campaign, and I think Trump's going to have to find a way to deal with that issue.
Well, one way that he's dealing with it is to point at his own negatives are sky high, but so are Secretary Clinton's.
Absolutely. And
she can't seem to get rid completely of the email issue. Now, her former assistant this past week again took the fifth. It was disclosed that she declined to be interviewed by the Inspector General at her own former State Department. Big problems, potentially.
There's no doubt Hillary Clinton has the email problem to deal with, and she's got other vulnerabilities when it comes particularly to foreign policy. While on the one hand, it's a strong point for her. On the other hand, she did support going into Iraq under President George W. Bush, and she has the whole Libya controversy to contend with as well. So,
and not just Benghazi, but Libya.
The whole Libya thing, including Benghazi, and so those are things that she has to deal with. While at the same time, she's able to display that she's a very knowledgeable when it comes to international relations. She knows the subject area, and I think even Trump's staunchest defenders would not try to make an argument that he's very knowledgeable when it comes to foreign policy and defense policy.
I think there was a lot made too of just kind of what Hillary Clinton's speech meant to Republicans who were still sort of on the fence about Trump. I mean, I think there was a lot in there, obviously designed to be that would appeal to folks who just cannot see, the Republicans who remain, who just cannot see themselves voting for Trump. There was some good stuff in there. Although we had the Speaker of the House come out this week and kind of low-key say, all right, I'm for Trump, Paul Ryan.
Now leave me alone.
Leave me alone. And, I'm not going to say it's an endorsement, but I'm going to vote for him and all of that, which, there you have it.
It was very low-key, and actually it kind of got overwhelmed by other news developments. Nonetheless, it is it is something important for the Trump campaign, because if he's going to win, he's going to have at least some support from the major figures in the Republican Party.
Well, come Tuesday, we have California, New Jersey, well, mostly California anyway. And I guess the question for Secretary Clinton is, and by implication, Mr. Trump too, for the course of his campaign, will Senator Sanders continue to the convention? Says he will. And what are they going to do? The Clinton people too.
It appears that his current intention is to hang in there, and as of today, it looks like he probably will. Now, whatever happens in California could have a major bearing on that. If he makes a really strong showing in California, I don't think there's any way that he's going to step aside right away. If, on the other hand, she has recovered enough to make an impressive showing in California, that certainly could influence Senator Sanders' decision to drop out sooner rather than later.
Yeah. We got to end it there because we're out of time. Guys, thanks to you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.